go live, and we're
Okay.
live. So I will take over, and greetings to folks. We are going to begin in 1 minute. 1 minute, and I have Marilyne Woodsmall, and this is one of her books, People, Patterns, Power. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. And I'm going to introduce her. Give me just a second here. Sorry about that. As you can see, what we're talking about is People, Patterns, Power. And it's going to begin in 1 minute. And I look forward to sharing with you and introducing my friend. If we have any technical glitches, my apologies. We're doing our best, but I want you to bear with us and remember it's more about the journey. And in fact, let me switch right over and introduce you. This is Declan, the Pivot and Profit podcast, and what I want you to do for a minute in honor of Bruce Lee, you all are coming in with a full glass. If you can see this on the camera, I'm holding a glass, and what I want you to do is pour that out, pour all your knowledge out for the next half hour or so, because what we're going to do is fill you up with some wisdom, experience, some NLP, and a little bit of the heart with one of my good friends, Marilyne Woodsmall. So let me introduce what this show is about: open hearts and connecting minds. Marilyne, as you see, is known as the expert on experts and is one of the principles of advanced behavioral modeling. Now, here's what I'm going to give you as the corporate speak. It's a consulting and training firm committed to increasing the performance and productivity of organizations and individuals using advanced behavioral science. This is none of that unadvanced behavioral science. This is the real deal. And I'm joking because what I want to introduce you to is the real heart. And the real heart to me is People, Patterns, Power is part of it, and is her book and her work in her professional level. And also a book that we're giving away to you folks who are watching or listening on the recording. If you email info at dundirectmedia.com, after this we're going to give two people, one a copy of this book, Personality Language, the other a copy of the book that to me is my friend, is the heart and soul of what the work she does, beyond the amazing NLP trainer she is, and many of you know her, is the story of Jaren, keeper of the Clean Heart Grid. And this is a CD and a book that I've been very influenced by, and it actually sparked a friendship. And with that, I'd like to say hello and welcome Marilyne.
Thank you, Declan. Oh, this is such an honor to be here this evening. I'm just so thrilled, and it's going to be a really fun evening, and we'll go with the flow and see what comes through.
And, you know, as we got the picture of Jaren up there, this is some of you folks have been introduced to this whole concept because I've been posting this heart, Marilyne, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I posed on Facebook and on Twitter, and a lot of the reasons people are here, is a lot of things that we're all running into, which is, how do we manage stress and change in this day and age? How do we actually, really, how do we manage stress and change? And with that, let me throw it to you with that simple, easy question.
Thank you. Well, it's very timely. In the words of the Nine Coach, all is divine timing, pure and simple. What's happening right now is our world is changing more quickly than ever, as you know, at a faster pace than ever before. And we're bombarded with information on every level. We have technological advances from every side of the planet. And what's happening is that it's distracting us from what's really important in life. The interesting thing that within this flux, and there is actually a constant. And that constant is something that reaches us at the very depth of who we are, the very depth of our being. And that has to do with success. Whether you're in the internet business, or whether you're a doctor, a teacher, a parent, whatever it is, in your personal or professional life, we still have this idea that we have to succeed. And this notion of success is what I'd like to talk about in terms of tension, stress, and change. Because when I wrote the story of Jaren in the 1990s, I began to see that success was not really what people thought it was. And that's how the Clean Heart Grid came about. And it's a symbol of several different things at once, which I'll get to a little later. I just want to come to the notion of success for a minute. People want to achieve success in any form, contextually relevant to their lives, professional or personal. Parents want to see their children excel. They want them to stand out somehow. In business, people want to be profitable. They want to be successful in their endeavors. And of course, athletes, I've worked with Olympic athletes for years, they want to succeed. They want to be the best that they can be. And lately we've had this whole thing with celebrities wanting the spotlight, and they want to outshine everyone else. And with this happening, there are changes that are occurring. I saw these changes occurring very early on, 20 years ago. And those changes have to do with the shift in consciousness. Now, these changes may be very obvious to some people and very subtle to others. Well, the thing is, this notion of success is taking on a new meaning. And what's happening with this shift is that the old paradigms, the past paradigms, are no longer relevant and no longer effective, and especially in terms of how we define success, how we reward success. These paradigms are no longer relevant or effective in terms of what I refer to as our diseducational system.
Right.
And the interesting thing is some people have been aware of this all along, and some are just discovering it. Now, with the story of Jaron, there are people in the 90s who just didn't understand what I was talking about. It's like, what does she mean? The clean heart grid, how is that going to help us? Well, the connection is that in the past, we were focused on particular skills that we thought would help a person succeed in business and in life. Well, those skills are no longer the ones by which we gauge success. They're no longer the ways by which we teach our children, nor are they the way that we get ahead. And as we've discussed, Declan, at certain times, what is known as so-called emotional intelligence and social intelligence, research has shown, are so much more important than IQ when it comes to success in life. Well, what that means is that we have to find a way. We found a way, a new paradigm that's more significant in the way we evaluate true success. And that success, this new paradigm, is going to be measured by your ability to experience life from the heart. And I call the new paradigm of success being of clean heart. And that's the essence of the story of Jaron. And it came about in working with Olympic athletes at training camps. I realized that we were giving them so much information, and the best way to present that information would be in a story form. And the reason is that our subconscious mind is best takes in information through images, through the visual. And the best way to do this is through subtlety and suggestion. So I decided the story form would be the best way to do this. And basically what it does is provide a blueprint for success in our world, and it allows us to create and to provide behavioral tools for change, powerful change. Some of it is NLP, some of it is other. And I brought it all together in a way that is meaningful to both the conscious and subconscious mind. And in modeling experts, what I decided to do was create what I call the laws of elite performance. And those I talk about in terms of the Mind Coach teachings to Jaron. And it's really wonderful to know how to perform in an elite manner. What the Mind Coach teaches Jaron is that there are other things that are more important than simply being an elite performer. And that has to do with what I call being a star performer. And what that has to do with is a new way of thinking about yourself, your world, and your place in it. And as a result of all this, I realized that in order to be able to steer our course in this new landscape, in the new paradigms, what I call the new energetic landscape, we need to have what I refer to in my new book and my work as the new way of being. And what does that mean? It means that we are here for a specific purpose. And in order to honor that purpose, in order to know what our true mission is, we have to be able to shift into a new way of thinking, literally a new way of being. Why? Because the nature of the world and the way in which we operate in this world is changing on all levels. So it's really important that we're able to find our way among all of these paradigms. And we have to be able to set our own course because it's changing every second of every day. And what this means is being able to find out who we are, because unless we know who we are, i.e. our identity, and what is our identity? Our identity is that configuration of beliefs, our emotions, our attitudes, our values, all of which are amazing models and elements in themselves, finding a way to distinguish among them and know which ones make up the I. Now, over the years, obviously, we've been called into action to carry out certain roles as we evolve into this new way of being. And the underlying foundation of this new landscape, this new way of being, again, has to do with heart-based thinking and doing what is based on love and an inner knowing of the connectivity of all things. Now, when I talk about heart-based thinking, people think, oh, well, does that mean we forget about left brain thinking? No. What it has to do with is a meshing, a melding of right and left brain, and connecting that to our heart center. And as you know, research has shown that there is actual thinking going on in that center. So the question becomes, how do we make sense of this? And how do we relate that to the I? Who are we? And once we know who we are, then we can move on to the next step. And that has to do with developing self-awareness. Where am I going? How do I get there? And in order to know where you're going, again, you have to know who you are. So once you have the baseline of who you are, then we can go in and use particular techniques, become aware of what needs to be changed so that we can become who we're meant to be in this mission. And that's where the behavioral change techniques come into play. And I'm able to help people move from where they are in the present to where they would like to go. Now, the next step, and that's not it, not all. It's wonderful to be able to know where you're going and how to get there and how to change. The other piece is to know how that connects to the whole. How is it that who I am and what I'm doing is going to connect to what I call the team essence? How do I flow and work cohesively with the team? So in order to begin the transformation to this new way of being and to serve most effectively, you have to be able to answer the core questions of who you are, where you're going, and how do you work with the rest of the team. And those are key. And the mind coach teaches Jaron how to do that from a variety of different perspectives. And what I'm finding is that when I talk about self-awareness, I did a presentation a couple of months ago, and I was talking about developing awareness, and people were like, what? What does that mean? And I gave them some exercises to begin to get in touch with their bodies and minds. And as you know, the mind-body is part of one cybernetic system. And that mind-body is also connected to the heart. So the key is finding that connection, that vibrational connection. I call it the synergenetic flow that allows you to bring all of those into alignment. And that's what this is about. Alignment of being. Now, in terms of stress, when we're stressed, when we are stressed out, we're out of alignment. And did you know that most of the time when people go to the doctor, their main complaint is stress. How do I deal with it? The number one issue physicians are dealing with. And now with all the changes that are going on different levels, even meteorologically with these storms and all that we're seeing in changes in political systems, educational systems, etc., people don't know what to do. Change is difficult. And as you know, there's a finite number of people on the planet who can deal with change, who welcome change. We call them difference people. Part of personality language has to do with, and people patterns, identifying those patterns, our model of the world that make us who we are. And that model of the world is different for each of us. That model of the world has to do with how we take in information, how we motivate ourselves, how we incorporate, how we internalize time and space. What triggers our motivation? What motives? How do we organize our lives? How do we make decisions? And in terms of stress, change is going to be the key, as well as awareness. So let me just talk about change for a minute.
Can I ask you a question if you don't mind?
Questions, please.
I had a great question that I saw online today, and a gentleman was asking, why do we resist change? And a lot of people came back with some great feedback, and one of the funny ones was somebody who studied as a doctor, and she made a really interesting argument that I'd never thought about. She said from a cellular level, our cells, and this again is a woman who's studying to be a doctor, our cells are based on homeostasis, are based on preserving the same state. So when difference or change happens in the body tends to attack it. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, because to me, that's just something I like to share with you and say, in terms of what you're saying, why do we resist change?
Well, it's interesting. Change makes most people uncomfortable. 85% of the population comes out of what I call sameness or qualified sameness filters. What does that mean? It means that they prefer the status quo. Let me go back a moment before I go into that. What is a people pattern? What does that refer to? Human beings are creatures of habit. We do things in ways that are most comfortable to us. When we're not comfortable with something, we reject it, unless we come from that particular pattern which welcomes change. Now, we are creatures of habit in our physical habits. We are also creatures of habit in our mental habits. And that's what people patterns and personality language is all about. It's identifying those mental habits that we get into that create behaviors that we, every day of our lives, we get into because it is a way of being. It's a way that makes us comfortable. So the critical factor here is one, knowing whether you are a difference person or a sameness person. And you'll know by whether or not you prefer the status quo or you like things to be different. On any day, do you like to get up at the same time every morning? Do you like to have the same things for breakfast? When you go out to dinner, do you like to go to the same restaurant? Do you like to order the same thing? Or are you a person, when you go out, you like to have variety? For difference people, variety is the spice of life. They abhor the status quo. They don't like things to be the same. Now, when you look at different parts of the country, let's take the Midwest, for example, it's highly sameness in orientation. People don't like change. Difference people, and in terms of your work, Declan, and what we've talked about, entrepreneurs are high difference people. Why? Because they like to create things that are new. They create that which has not existed already. Sameness people and qualified sameness people are typical business people. In the business world, the average business person is what we call qualified sameness. What is that about? Qualified sameness is about improving upon what already exists. It's taking what is there and making improvements upon it. Whereas difference, i.e. entrepreneurial people, are difference people. They are creating from scratch. And this has very important implications in terms of creativity and education. And as you know, I'm really focused on working on changing the diseducational system. One of the things that we're doing in diseducation is having students go through rote memorization. They're learning worthless information, regurgitating this worthless information, and they're not being taught how to think critically. And part of that is because the system, the diseducational system, is a sameness institution. And when we talk about the 3 R's, we're talking about a system that wanted to create obedience, wanted people to be obedient, live their 9-to-5 jobs, work at their 9-to-5 jobs, come home and conform and be conformists within the system. And when you have someone thinking out of the box, that poses a threat to the system. And that's one of the reasons that we don't have creativity in school. And that's going to be a major issue in the future, because unless we can create thinking minds, minds that can think out of the box, and minds that can problem solve and create solutions which aren't already there, we're not going to be able to deal with the complexity of the world, the increasing complexity of the world. And not only the increasing complexity, the diverse, I call it simultaneous developing diversity, because these changes are occurring simultaneously on all levels. So we need minds that are going to be able to deal with the complexity, with the diversity, and with the rapidity of change. And getting back to your question, change is uncomfortable again to most people. And change, in order to deal with change, a person has to be able to internally make changes to deal with the changes around. And in our society, we're not encouraging change, even in the family relationship, in our interrelationships with other people. Because when you change, that means moving out of that comfort zone that you've created for other people. They're comfortable with who you are. And if you change, it's like, well, I don't know how to deal with this person now. How do I deal with him or her? You've changed. And I'm coming back to the notion I began with at the very beginning. In order to steer a course through this landscape, this new landscape, we have to be able to change. And we need to be able to change at a level where we are aware of that change. And because most people can't deal with change, it's stressing them out. And stressing them out on all levels, on mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical levels. Now, let me talk about stress a moment. One of the easiest ways to deal with stress has to do with our breathing. And breathing, speaking of conscious awareness, is outside of our conscious awareness. And most people are totally unaware of how they breathe. Yeah. And in NLP, as you know, we talk about the different modalities. People are either going to be visual or auditory tonal, kinesthetic, or auditory digital. Well, each of those modalities, each of those systems breathes in a very particular way. Now, when it comes to the visual people tend to breathe very high up in their chest. And interestingly, when people are stressed out, they tend to breathe very high up in their chest.
Right.
As you know. Now, auditory tonal people are focused on the way something sounds, and their breathing tends to be in the middle of their chest. For auditory tonal people, breathing is very balanced. Balance is key for auditory tonal people. And for kinesthetics, they breathe diaphragmatically. They breathe low down, and it really helps them in terms of steering their course, literally, no pun intended. Now, ADs, auditory digitals, tend to breathe kinesthetically as well, unless they're stressed out, at which point they'll breathe high up in their chest. And you'll be able to distinguish each type by the way in which they speak. Visual people tend to speak very rapidly, and their gestures are very rapid. Auditory tonals are very balanced. They're very soothing in their voices. Kinesthetic people speak very slowly, and their movements are very slow. And you'll notice that when you speak to kinos. Auditory digitals tend to have monotonous tonality in their voice. They usually don't go high or low. It's just very monotonous. And again, wherever you're coming from, it's important to be simply aware so that you have a baseline. And that's the key in terms of knowing who you are. Creating the baseline so when you deviate from the baseline, you'll know how to make the change. Now, our understanding of who we are and how we think is the best way and the easiest way to enhance our being. So it's important to be able to unpack this and decode it. I'm using a term I use in behavioral modeling. As a modeler, I go in and determine how an expert does what he or she does. I decode unconscious competency. What we found is an expert knows what he or she does, doesn't know how they do it. They know what they do, they don't know how they do it. So in terms of understanding who we are, I use the same analogy. It's decoding who we are so that we can unpack that information and use it in a way to create that mind-body-heart alignment in the best way to enhance our being. Now, as for breathing, breathing's important because on many levels. One, inhalation stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Exhalation stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Why is this important? Because the subconscious mind controls our breathing. So if you become consciously aware of your breathing, you'll be able to change the nature of your experiences, i.e. the nature of your emotions. So with breathing, you can really effectively control your emotions. It's hugely powerful. And I'll come to emotions in a minute. Another nuance about breathing. Most people in meditation know how to breathe. Mystics teach us, as you know, how to breathe how? Diaphragmatically. And most people who meditate know how to breathe diaphragmatically. As I said, people with stress breathe high in your chest. So how would it be helpful to learn how to breathe diaphragmatically? The best way to practice this is to lie on the floor in a crocodile position. And when you do that, you're forced to learn how to breathe diaphragmatically. If you look at babies, they'll teach you. They instinctively breathe diaphragmatically.
And they have their bellies sticking out.
Exactly. And also, you're right. Exactly.
Actually, one of my monk friends used to say, he goes, the thing about being a monk is you get fat. It looks like you're fat because your belly sticks out because when you're relaxed, that's what you do. Exactly. And that's so important because our society, especially, well, now both men and women, what are we told to do? Hold in our tummies. Well, what do you think that does? Let's hold in our tummies, and that's the way we meant to be. Well, that goes against our alignment of being. What we're literally doing is impeding, creating a block to that alignment of being by our holding that in, and it's affecting our breath. And when we change our breath, it's changing the way we take in information. It's changing the nature of our emotions. It's changing our interactions with people. It's changing our awareness. And it's misaligning us because, once again, we are delving into that subconscious mind connection. And one of the things, like in NLP, a lot of students always ask, well, how do you know whether it's your unconscious mind or your conscious mind that's thinking? One of the techniques I like to teach people is to become what the ancients taught us to be, a witness, develop a witness consciousness, and that's a good way to develop awareness. What you do is go on the outside to a meta level where the witness is always present and observing what's going on. And when you reach that point, you'll know if it's you or your unconscious mind that's doing the thinking. And the other thing is, once you know that, you're going to find that it doesn't even matter which one is in control, because the key is to create that alignment. Right.
And in the teachings, I teach them how, to expedite the process of become aware of all this unconscious nonsense. And when you go through it, you're able to tell the difference between what is your unconscious and whether it's something else. It's pretty powerful.
Well, I mean, and understanding that, it's so funny, it's so obvious to folks who understand it, but so many people move in a way that they're just so detached from not only their inner core, but what you go back to in the breath. I mean, I remember when I took my first intro acting class, the very first thing they had us do was learn how to breathe.
I'm not surprised.
And
how did that change you?
Half the class couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I played trumpet as a kid, so I was breathing fine. I had that whatever developed, and that was, I won't say easy, but it's something that came more naturally to me. And I was amazed that literally he said that every time half the class literally has never thought, and never occurred to them. And they were all, like you say, all of them were up in their chest.
Yeah, and clueless. I mean, if they could only... The thing is, breathing is an unconscious process, again, that's controlled by the automatic nervous system. And, the yogis have known this for centuries. They've learned how to do it. So if you consciously become aware of your breathing, you're going to be able to change the nature of your experience. And what does that mean? That means you're going to be able to change the nature of your emotions. So breathing is going to be one of the keys in effectively controlling the emotions.
Mm.
And you know, in classes, you know, in teaching, I'll ask students, well, how many of you think you can control your emotions? Most people believe they can't do that, even though they experience them every day. Well, our postures change our emotions. If you happen to be standing or sitting with your arms locked in a very tight position, your physiology is telling you something. And if you let go of that locked position, your physiology is going to change. And there's an interesting concept here in terms of that mind-body connection, mind-body-heart connection. When we change something in our mind, it's going to necessarily create a change in our physiology. When we change something in our mind, it's necessarily going to change something in our physiology. And I've noticed that over the years in my mind, in my coaching and in modeling and working with executives, whatever, I can always tell if a person has a new thought that's coming into their mind. And that change in physiology may be very subtle. It might be a blink of the eye. It might be muscle tension around the mouth. It might be a twitch in a finger. It might be a change in knee position or whatever. Both are connected. And in terms, again, going back to your question with stress, emotions are connected to stress. So it's really important to be able to control our emotions. Breathing is simply one of the ways. Now, there's a lot of confusion in Western cultures when it comes to emotion, because we confuse the notion of feeling and sensation and emotion because there's no distinction that's made between them. Now, my personal definition of emotions and feelings is the following. I look at emotions as a configuration, a very specific configuration or matrix of sensations in our body to which we attach a label. Again, it's a configuration, a very specific configuration or matrix or grouping of sensations in our body to which we attach a label. Now, the issue, the confusion comes into play because we have these sensations to which we attach labels on one hand, but people attach different labels to different things. So the universal problem is that we have no way of knowing for an individual exactly what those sensations are to which they're attaching labels. And, for example, when a person says, "Oh, I'm happy," that happiness is created. Again, it's a configuration of sensations in the body. What makes one person happy may be, how a person determines if he or she is happy is calibrated by, let's say, a lightness in the chest. For another person, it may be a tingling in the body. For another person, it may be a sound coming through the mic.
This is not a sound effect. I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm, and it's so great.
Great. Interesting. Well, the universe is confirming. Very good.
You were talking about tingling and then the lightning.
Right.
It was classic.
That's great. I love it.
Thank you, cut. You've been wonderful. Good night, folks. Sorry.
Well, there's that. It's a vibration. I mean, here we have an electrical impulse. These feelings are connected, no pun intended, to these impulses in our body. And we have different types of emotions. We have what we call good feelings and bad feelings. And when we say that, what we're doing is literally interpreting the sensations. We are translating them linguistically through our bodies and thoughts in our heads. Again, the mind-body-heart connection comes into play. Now, how do we create emotions? We create them in different ways, and we encode them in different ways. As I said, people attach different labels to their sensations, and we encode these labels in different ways. Now, how do we create them? Do you think they just appear out of nowhere? They don't just fall from the sky. Emotions have a behavioral basis, and they're created in one of several ways. They're created through pictures of voices in our head, through sounds in our head, or things we hear on the outside, through sensations, through smells, etc., or through words. That's that AD, that auditory digital component. The sounds are the way something sounds. That's the auditory tonal component. So it's through visual, auditory, kinesthetic, once again, and also olfactory or gustatory. And I'll just quickly mention the olfactory and gustatory because we don't pay enough attention to them in our society. The olfactory is our sense of what? Our sense of smell. And why do you think the fragrance industry spends billions of dollars on different fragrances? Because they are connected to emotions. They are connected to feelings, to experiences we've had. Have you ever walked into a room and you smell a particular, whether it be a rose or a fragrance, it'll immediately take you back to a time in your life where, oh wow, this feels really, it was just a wonderful experience you had. Taste is also important. The gustatory. Chocolate. Have you ever tasted a piece of chocolate that takes you back to a time when you were, oh my, that first experience you had, whatever it may be, with a loved one, where you're eating chocolate or whatever. It just conjures up all these amazing images. In fact, one of my favorite authors, Marcel Proust, wrote an entire tome based on the gustatory. He was at his aunt's house and eating a tilleul, which is a madeleine, which is a little French cookie, and drinking tilleul, a tea. And those tastes conjured up images from his childhood, which were the basis of an entire novel, In Search of Things Past, in which he discusses the notion of time and philosophy and art, the meaning of life, all this from olfactory and gustatory. Pretty amazing.
You actually reminded me of a line from James Joyce's Ulysses. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan loved to feast on the innards of fowls and beasts. And the guy was always frying food. And it was very earthy Irish. But that was his characterization. And the whole point of the novel, like Proust, is that whole genre from the perspective, the view of the person. And that's what made it at that period so radical, is the point of view. Like sometimes people wouldn't be able to follow it because they're used to an author sort of being the point of view, but sometimes the reader would literally become the point of view, and he would be showing you the visuals, and it would be up to you to make the judgments, not the author, if that makes sense.
It does. In fact, that triggered a whole new genre in France in the, was it the 70s, the whole notion of structuralism and deconstructionalism, and that was one of the elements of that whole period, and it had to do with the author and his or her life was no longer really important. It was deconstructing that into the different pieces, which made it significant, and of course Proust wasn't part of that. However, he in his way opened up a whole new way of looking at the world from that perspective.
Wow. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It just really is. I mean, what we're really talking about is managing stress and change, and there's so many themes of...
Obviously, it's such an awareness that I think when people are detached, when their emotional state is
seen as separate, and all my marketing friends love to use this because what they're trying to do is create emotional states.
Exactly.
Which is funny why I understood NLP almost intuitively when I had no background and no real, to this day, I won't say by any means I'm really learned in NLP. I mean, I love discussing it, but I come from studying poetry, and the purpose of poetry was to evoke emotion.
Right.
And that's where it wasn't, I won't say hard because I find it fascinating, but it made more sense to me when you talk about what you see, hear, feel, taste, the way people react, the way they look, and when I could write a poem that would touch one person and their experience would be projected onto my words. That was magic. That was the connection. It rarely happened, which is why I'm not a great poet. But
I don't know about that.
Well, that's the point. Is, I mean, my great writer friends used to tell me, they go, "You're not a great writer. You're a writer. It's up to me to decide if I think you're a great writer." And they meant that more because I was at a younger stage where I was like, I'm a great writer. And they're like, "You're a writer. Are you there?"
I'm here. It just went out for a second because of the cat. Okay.
Oh, no worries.
I'm back.
You're, and I'll just say it was really a great learning, was that I was trying in my ego to feel really great. And what they gave me was the first learnings of surrender to the audience, and the audience will like you, the audience won't like you. The point of the art is not, that's up to the audience. But like the old hippies taught me in Haight Street, the purpose of art is to beautify the artist. And if anybody else gets it, awesome.
even if one person gets it, that's making a huge difference in the world.
And that's the same thing what you're talking about is like people are like think that all this stress and change, like way back at the beginning, I put the Obama picture, "We are change," and I sort of skipped it because you were on a great riff. But they feel almost, the funny thing is, I feel like there is this innocence, naivete in Americans, and there's a beautiful innocence, naivete. It's part of one of the things I love about this young country called America. And it's almost like the naivete got hurt by this guy who tried and did it basically as a pitch. Not get political, but anybody, I've even shown it. I said, I put it up on the screen because it's an amazing marketing technique. We are change. But then I look at the audience and go, hey, so how much has changed? Not much, and they all crack up. But they feel, because what was funny was at their hearts, that was the first shift that they really, not just because of what was happening, but the whole theme that we are. What I loved is it's so deep and so rooted in what we are. We are change.
We are.
Not his political statement. Let's get that out of your heads. That what you're just saying is we are change.
We are. And in order to be that change, and that, what you brought up is really key in terms of the new paradigms. It's no longer about finding the solutions. We are the solution. And it's being able to identify who we are so that we can be that change. See the connection? It's so critical.
And if you don't have that, if it doesn't start from within, you're going to try the old, very typical when people try to look for external solutions to what's in their heart.
Exactly. And the heart is key. And the heart is going to be that one part of us that aligns, that is connected to the core of who we are. We each came here. We were born onto this planet with a mission. And that mission is encoded in our heart and soul. And unless we can connect with that heart, we're going to be totally disconnected from what we are meant to be doing here. And that is why it is so critical to be able to connect with that piece. And, as I said early on, the new paradigm has to do with heart-based awareness. I'll come back to that in a minute. I wanted to stress the importance of our emotions because, again, stress is so connected to our emotional state. And if we can control our state, we control our emotions, and we affect the whole alignment of who we are. We affect our attitude, our presence, our physiology, everything. And I'm going to throw out a statement which I'd like everyone to remember. You are controlled by that with which you identify. You are controlled by that with which you identify. So if you identify with negative emotions, what's going to happen? You're going to be controlled by them. They become mental monsters. They can take control of you and your mind and your body and your heart. They can become either your greatest enemy or your greatest ally. We talk about negative emotions and positive emotions. The negative emotions, the good way to determine, to identify what a negative emotion is, it's the ones that drain you. When you're feeling drained, that's going to be a negative emotion. So it's really important to identify the emotions that enhance your being with those that align our core and allow us to be who we are in our mission, and distinguish those from the ones that detract from us, that impede us, that get in the way of accomplishing our goal. And this is not theory-based. I'm talking about the actual cause of emotion and how to actually change them. And once we change them, once we take control, if we don't take control, they're going to block the path to alignment of being and block them in a big way. And again, we have positive, and those are the empowering emotions. And how do we know that? Because behaviorally, from a behavioral perspective, they enhance our ability to achieve a goal. Whether that goal is to write, whether it is to perform a task on a job on a given day, or on a grander scale, to live our mission. The negative emotions are the disempowering ones. They drain us. Again, they distract us. That's why people, have you ever walked into a room and you're feeling really good? You walk into a room and there's somebody or a couple of people and they were depressed and really in a negative state. you suddenly feel drained, like, oh my, here I was feeling so great, and I walk in here and, oh crumb, this feels terrible. They're literally draining our mind, body, spirit. And if I may say so, they're living at a lower vibration.
Yeah. It's like it's so funny, the vampire-ish element, that comes out of such a theme of people just sucking energy. I mean, literally in a fictitious character. But the whole metaphor is that of somebody who lives off the life force of another person. And I don't think we're talking about vampires who are real, but just people who do that really suck the life force out of other people.
They do, and some do it intentionally, some not.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because what you said is, I love something that just sparked to me is like the whole. I mean, we have such a chance right now as people in challenging times to shift and do something really different. And there's this sort of malaise that you sense, and I mean, people feel like they're playing a poker game, like everyone's bluffing because things were supposedly so well a few years ago when it was just all a giant hoax. And the hoax wasn't you or, I had one guy come on Twitter the other night, a friend who I won't mention, but he saw the film Too Big to Fail, which is about the stock market crash and manipulation and things that went on, which, by the way, we haven't done anything about. So people go, they just riff in this bad negative emotion. And he comes out and he goes, I couldn't sleep. I'm such a sucker. And what was weird was he was going back to something that had really nothing to do with him. And I wouldn't, put him down. In fact, I was actually witnessing his honesty and honored by it in a way. But I wanted to reach out to him. And, Twitter is just, it's not the place for me to, I don't know. I don't think 140 characters is going to touch that. Sorry, I'm not that zen. But yeah, I wish I could sum up something deep in 140 characters. But what was more important is here is a guy basically repeating that whatever happened in those events, could have been real estate investments. There's a lot of things that happened that we're a sucker in this whole thing, that we are change. What's funny is we don't have this external source. He was not to change. What was funny is everybody in this country jumped up, and they should remember that, is that we, not him, we are the change.
We are.
And if we don't look to the hims or hers or anyone, I'm not dissing anybody politically. I think that's not a place to be. They have their job, but when you live it in your life and you express it to other people, that change that will happen in your life may not save the whole economy and all that stuff. That's a silly way to think. You start it, save, it's the old Jewish saying, save one life, you save the universe.
Right.
Save your own.
Right.
And you will save people, and it's not like saving, rescuing, that's not the gig. It's the real belief that tomorrow to now you can shift it. And not, and it doesn't mean circumstance, everything goes away. And people always have this like cynical mindset. And somebody had actually asked today, how could we change that mindset? I love this question. And I basically, just to bring it back to you, I said, it's all about letting people understand that they are a vibration, that they are energy, that they are not a detached thing, separate, that every single one of us is connected. And that's what makes it so critical to change yourself. That's really, I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm going with it other than...
No, you're right.
Thank you for the sound effect.
Vibration is the key. And, you and I have talked about this years ago when the mind coach was teaching Jaron about vibration. On teachings, I'd get looks like, what is she talking about, vibration? And this goes back to, the 1990s. Everything is vibration. And I knew then that 10, 15 years from that time, quantum physics would be proving everything about vibration and intent, and how even the very nature of our thoughts are vibration. And that's why it's so important to maintain that high vibration and to be aware of our emotions, because each emotion is connected to a certain vibration. And Dr. Emoto has proven that over the years. Now most people are aware of his work with water. When water molecules are exposed to hard metal music and to hatred, words that express hatred, negativity, that the molecules go into these hideous formations. And yet, at the same time, when one uses words of gratitude and speaks of love and positive emotion, the water molecules just are magically transformed into these amazing images. Very beautiful, very symmetric, very balanced. And that's another thing. When one is misaligned, there's no balance. So the mind, body, heart is out of alignment, and our vibrations are totally disconnected and become lower. And because our bodies are over 70% water, what Dr. Emoto is showing that whatever we're exposing our bodies to is going to affect our physical, mental, spiritual self, every level of our being. I want to mention toxicity here before I go on to another distinction with emotions that I'd like to share with everyone. The ancients, especially the Sufis, talked about the different kinds of food that we ingest. The first was the air that we breathe. The second kind was the actual food that we eat. The other was the liquids that we take in. And then the last was the impressions that we take in. When you think about all the violence that we see, the video games people play, children and adults alike, and images we may see, those who watch TV are constantly just this constant barrage of negative images and negative thoughts and negative everything. Those are negative impressions that are affecting our mind-body-heart connection and are taking us out of alignment. And I'm adding a fourth to that. It's the toxicity. It's the vibrations that we're taking in. So it's not just the air, the food, the water, and the impressions. To that I'm adding the vibrations, because all of those are vibrationally based. So again, it is important to be aware of what we are taking in. What is it our mind, body, heart is taking in? And if you're going to be distracted by all the garbage, you're not going to be able to come within and learn how to become self-aware. Distraction is poison. Distraction takes us out of the core of our being, of who we are, who we're meant to be, what we're meant to be doing. And again, our emotions are connected to that. So once we're aware of the emotions, that are the high vibrational emotions, we're able to direct and to orchestrate. Think of a maestro orchestrating the different aspects of being, the mind, body, spirit, heart. One can orchestrate those into a beautiful musical composition that's harmonious, that works together, that blends together in beautiful ways, rather than discordant tones that are out of alignment. And our emotions, again, I want to come back to this. This is key. It's really important to learn how to disconnect from those emotions that take us off our path, that take us out of alignment. And we're taught in NLP, there's a very powerful distinction that we teach that has to do with the way, well, let me just give you an example and then I'll explain it. We experience life from one of two perspectives. And I'd like you to think of a time when you were on a roller coaster. And I'd like you to be in that seat of the roller coaster, seeing what you see, hearing what you hear, feeling what you feel, and whatever that brings as you're going up and down that roller coaster. Feel and see and hear what it's like to be in that seat. And now shake that off, literally stand up or shake it off. And I'd like you to change the perspective now. And I'd like you to be on the outside looking in at yourself in that roller coaster seat going up and down. Notice how that changes the nature of your experience. You see, we call that, when you're on the outside looking in, we call that disassociation. And the easiest way to disconnect from an emotion is to be disassociated, i.e. divorce from it, literally to detach from it. Because this memory now that you had becomes, if you were feeling sick in the roller coaster, when you're on the outside looking in, you're not in it any longer. So the memory you have becomes passive. And you'll find that people, once they disassociate, they become indifferent to the intense emotion they had experienced when associated. It's really an important distinction because it deals with the way we position the self. When you're on the outside looking in, you have a totally different perspective on life. So again, we experience life from one of two perspectives, association and disassociation. And this really ties into this notion I've been discussing of self-awareness as well, because when you're self-aware, you know whether you're associated or disassociated. And one of the interesting things that is coming to mind now, there are a lot of self-help books out there. People want to know how to solve particular problems. Well, guess what? When you're in the problem is not when you're thinking about how to solve it. You have to be disassociated in order to be aware of the fact that this is there. So it's sort of like a catch-22 situation. The other thing is, I can go on about this. I know time is an issue here.
Well, we're about 5 minutes if we could, because I think we're heading about an hour. But God, I definitely would. I'm fascinated, so we're good.
It's really, self-help is really, again, a catch-22, because you have to be aware of the fact that you need something. And if you're associated in the emotion, you're not.
Right.
And there's another thing that I'd like to mention about emotions. The truth is that either you have emotions or you don't. And how is that possible? Because if you want to have emotions, if you want to experience emotions, guess what? You have to be associated. If you don't want to have emotions, then you have to be disassociated. And in our work in behavioral change and in modeling all these years, it's interesting, a secret discovered. What we discovered is that emotions have an on-off switch. Either you're in them or you're not. So either you're experiencing emotions or you're not experiencing them. There's this misconception in our society. People think we have emotions all the time. We don't have emotions all the time. Or rather, I should say, we're not aware of our emotions all the time because we're not experiencing them all the time. There are times when we're disassociated. There are times when we're associated. We assume, though, as human beings, that we always have them, and that's not the case. And also, you'll know, we all know that some people have a higher percentage of emotions than others. Myers-Briggs makes the distinction of thinkers and feelers. Feelers tend to live in the emotions, whereas thinkers tend to live in their head. So thinkers are much more, they're dissociated. The feelers on the Myers-Briggs are the associated. Now, of course, most people, unless they know this, are not aware of the distinction. And once you become aware of it, it literally has the potential to change the way you operate in the world. This one distinction of being associated versus disassociated. And the thing is, it's important to be able to develop the ability to go back and forth contextually. Why is that? Because there are times when you want to be associated, when you want to be enjoying whatever brings you joy and happiness. If you're having dinner with a loved one, a significant other, if you're playing with your dog or your cats, if you're on vacation, you want to be associated. Why would you want to be disassociated from that and be on the outside looking in? Now, if you're in pain, if you're stressed, speaking of stressed, or if you're in a situation where you want to be objective in terms of, let's say, making an important decision, it would be better to be disassociated. The thing is, most people spend their lives living in one or the other and have no way of controlling it. What I've just shared is a tool that enables you now to be able, one, to be aware, and two, to change it. The other thing, I can go on, just one quick thing before we're being associated or disassociated are experienced in the present moment. That's really important to realize. And the mechanism that triggers whether we're associated or disassociated is connected to how we experience time, specifically how we experience the now. Now I'll come back to this on-off switch. That's the other thing. I talked about emotions having an on-off switch. You can't have both switches on at the same time. If you're associated, you're going to have the potential to experience either the positive emotions or the negative emotions. That's it. You can't have it both ways. Now, there's another time, there are a couple of other refinements about emotions that I'd love to talk about, and that's the essence of what existentialism has known for years, and even the realm of phenomenology. It has to do with temporality, and how how emotions have been experienced. But that will be for another time, no pun intended.
Classic. But now is not the time. Marilyne, it's such a pleasure. I pray to the technology gods that we've come through well. It seems like it. And if we've had any problems with folks, my apologies. I think the audio at least will come through great. And I do have up on the screen, if you want to go to declandunn.com/personality, I've created a short link to Marilyne's book, Personality Language. And if you want to email me at info@dunndirectmedia.com, D-U-N-N, the word direct, the word media.com, and talk about what you've learned about stress or change or questions. I'll be happy to share them with Marilyne, as well as we're going to pick 2 winners and just sort of randomly to give the personality language, and another one, the story of Jaron. And I want to thank you for not only sharing, but this is just such a great chat, and I really look forward to setting it up so we can share more of this just learnings and knowledge, and really help, like we both know, this is really about reaching out to folks in a tough time and say, you can change. We are change, guys. Mm-hmm. That's the beautiful part of it. We are not static, and this time does not define you. That's just my encouragement.
Well said.
It's like no time defines you. You define you, and you have an amazing heart and just shared so much with us. And I just really want to thank you. I'm blessed to be able to share these kind of discussions. And I'm so glad
we go off in left field a lot. I know we have great discussions. It's really joy, really wonderful. You are great. You're just an amazing person, human being, and you're just such a pioneer and genius in your work. It's such a great combination. And you're one of those who gets it. And I may say something, Declan, I met him years ago, and he got it. I knew immediately he was one who really gets it. He got it then. And speaking of change, it's been just a wonderful journey to see how we both changed over the years and are continuing to do so. So thank you for all that you are.
Nice. Well, listen, guys, we're going to end it here. So stay on a second, Marilyne. I'm going to end the show here, and I'll be hanging out on Facebook and Twitter later on tonight if anybody happened to be there and wanted to chat and say hello. We're going to stop.